feature presentation.
Yeah.
India, it's a real pleasure to talk to you. I first wanted to start off by asking you a question in retrospect, because there's a lot of changes going on within the festival community, especially with Sundance. So I just wanted to ask, what did it mean to you to have had Good One play at Sundance in Park City, Utah, as the festival is now looking for a new location to call home?
Wow, interesting. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, very exciting to get to talk to you. Um, Gosh, I haven't considered this. I mean, it was really leading up to our premiere there. I I had been, maybe people were trying to sort of temper my expectations, but I heard a lot of horror stories. Not about the festival, but just like, oh, it's expensive, it's hard to get around, all of these things, sort of setting me up for the challenges. But I don't know, me and the part of our film team that was able to join me, we had a really kind of, I don't know, this is such a corny word to use, but kind of a magical time. Like it was, there's something about, I think, the mountains and the altitude. I mean, I love the mountains. I feel very not at home, more like comfortably out of my element in the mountains. I mean, that's like part of the movie I made. And so yeah, I mean that setting and the sort of, yeah, the altitude and the remove felt very special to me. And the weather was actually kind of lovely while we were there. There was no like massive snowstorm or whatever, which I don't know, all of the specificities of the place were yeah, just part of the experience. So I don't know. I had a great time. I can't imagine it anywhere else, but I think Sundance as an organization and institute will, wherever it ends up, I think it will be the same anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioning, the relationship that the film has to the great outdoors, and even, the festival itself and where it's set, there's probably a surreal quality to how you felt in the moment presenting it. And there was something else I was curious about, because I was watching your introduction for the film, and I was curious to, why did you call executive producer Sarah Winchall, who also produced I Saw the TV Glow, that
Mhm.
played at the festival, and co-producer Allison Bunch, the film's Guardian Angels.
Oh, well, I think Sarah was my dear friend before she signed on to help us make the movie. So, I already felt very close to her, and she just she wasn't on set while we shot the film. Um, but she was always present and just like a really meaningful, not just collaborator in practical ways, but sort of emotionally there for me. And Allison, who I also adore, who works with Sarah, um, I just felt like I could lean on their expertise and their instincts and knowledge, in about making films of this size in this world. And I just felt very sort of protected with them in our corner.
Does it feel familial at all? Because you always hear filmmakers and actors talking about smaller productions in particular, but even bigger ones where there kind of is a family aspect to it. And because there are so many people that are working on this production with you that are taking on multiple roles, does that feel a little bit more like a safety net for you as a director?
Absolutely. When I first, after James LeGros agreed to be in the movie, and the first conversation I had with him, I asked him um, to describe the 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 best filmmaking experience he'd had, and he's had so many,
Right.
of
Well, Kelly
he's been on.
Reichardt, Gus Van
Yeah,
Sant,
I
Todd
mean,
Haynes.
yeah, he's worked with like every great filmmaker who I admire and look up to. And he's worked on the tiniest productions to, massive films. And he said that the best experiences he had were always ones where the entire crew approached the project with a filmmaker mentality. And I think meaning like just everyone was sort of there thinking holistically about the process and caring about the end product. And I really feel like I had that on this movie. I mean, many of the people who worked on the movie are filmmakers in their own right, and and make their own work, and agreed to work on this movie in the capacities that they did. But I think and so many of them were my friends before, and the ones that weren't, became my friends. I think there was really this incredible warmth that I think to make a movie, in 12 days like we did with limited resources, like you need that. At least I need that.
Well, absolutely. There's a feeling of camaraderie and collaboration, and the independent spirit, and you can definitely feel that. And with someone like James LeGros, obviously, mentioning all those names, like I even think about him, in the early '90s with working with Catherine Bigelow, and there's
Yeah.
always that line that he says to Keanu Reeves' character, "I'll see you in hell, Johnny," where it's like he's so memorable in those little moments, and to see not only him as an actor but an executive producer on this as well, like
Yeah.
there's this feeling of like everybody really cared about the movie that they were making with you. There's something that you mentioned in a Sundance profile that I'd like to ask you a little bit more about. You said that you had a very specific idea of what it meant to be a director, and it wasn't me. What did you mean by that?
Well, specifically, I meant my dad. I grew up with a father who's a filmmaker and watching him work. And I think there's like a great luxury to that because I was exposed to the process. But I don't know. I pictured him in that role, and all of the things that that meant. You know, male, I don't know, tall, whatever. Just I had this one model, and I think I had to sort of you know, start exposing myself to the work of female filmmakers who had been working for a long time, but whose work, I discovered in my like later teens and 20s. Um, and also just learn to trust myself and also trust my own kind of natural way of being in the world, like it's okay if I'm not the loudest voice in the room, or whatever it is, just trust my own methods. And a big part of that for me is listening to other people, and uh, that's something I really value, and part of yeah what the movie's about for me too.
Absolutely. The way that characters speak without any dialogue. There are certain expressions that Sam gives that you can tell says so much, especially about, being maybe somewhat let down by a parental figure, and sort of looking at it from the perspective of, parents are as flawed as anyone else, and you kind
Hmm.
of have to make your own way. I was curious as well because you mentioned, female filmmakers. Were there Could you give me some names in terms of like who were those filmmakers that you saw as someone that inspired you as a director?
Oh my God. I mean, it's a very long list. I mean, I'm kind of half from New Zealand, and when I started discovering Jane Campion's films, her early work through, um, I mean, her whole filmography, you know, Claire Denis, Kelly Reichardt, Nicole Holofcener. Um, I mean, I could so many.
Oh, definitely. And like I love that, people like Claire Denis and Kelly Reichardt, I think are finally starting to be seen now a little bit more in the spotlight in terms of their filmographies and their careers. And, I think they were taken for granted when they first started as filmmakers. So it's really wonderful that
Interesting.
people seem to be catching up, I think, a little bit more on them now, as
Yeah, I mean,
directors.
I I'm trying to remember the first Kelly Reichardt film I saw. I can't remember if it was Wendy and Lucy
Well, I was
or
actually going to
Old
say that
Story,
because
but
I was reminded of that watching If Found,
oh,
which
cool.
felt very much like, the bond between person and animal, especially dog, and like that was
Totally.
something else I
Yeah.
was curious about. When you started working on your films like Medusa and Hannah's and If Found, were there themes or ideas that you weren't maybe even thinking of that you were finding that were repeating themselves? Because even watching something like Medusa, I noticed in terms of just on a technical level, you play with sound in such an interesting
Mm,
way that I feel like a lot of filmmakers don't take into consideration when it comes to, someone being in a different room or a vehicle and how it sounds muffled. So like in
mm,
Medusa, you have Meredith in the washroom texting while this, group of people in the other room, you can still hear the conversation, but it's somewhat muffled. And it
mm,
also reminded me a little bit of when Sam is sitting in the car listening
mm.
to what Matt and Dylan are doing, but you can't hear it completely.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of things come to mind when you say that. I think every short I made, I sort of used as a vehicle to like learn how to make films, and try things out. And I think I can see with each one of the shorts I made that I was kind of trying to learn how to do something. And like specifically with the sound, I think I've been really lucky with everything I've made that I've worked with really talented people who are more experienced than me. So, when I think about mixing that short, it's like the sound mixer's expertise and that where I learned like, oh, where it just opened up to me what was possible and how you can sort of um, explore the subtleties of the story through sound, um, something I thought a lot about with Good One. But yeah, I mean, I think they're all stepping stones, and I think I see more connections now than I did at the time, I think. And I can sort of notice my obsessions coming back, like interests that kind of you can't quite work your way out of. Like you'll always keep coming back to them. And I think so many filmmakers do that even when they work in like different genres or
Definitely. What you were talking about before with listening, like it felt like you were listening to the environments that you were in. Like even in the opening of Good One, before the score begins, we hear the sound of water. We hear the environment play a role. Was that something that you were considering even in the script process for Good One in terms of the sounds of the environment?
oh yeah. I mean, I'm I remember in the writing process thinking about how the woods, when you're kind of like totally outside of, city life, the woods suddenly you think of it as being like quiet and peaceful, but it's actually quite loud because, all of the sounds of the forest and even like your presence in it, your footsteps or, your breath, like it all becomes louder in your perception. Um, so I was thinking about that and I think wrote some of that texture into the script, but then was also thinking about how the the dialogue and the sort of, especially in the first two-thirds of the movie, the kind of like incessant chatter between these two guys, how it sort of is competing with some of these like natural textures. I mean, there's a significant moment in the movie that takes place, a conversation next to a waterfall, and I think I wrote that into the script because I was thinking about, that kind of rushing, intense, like white noise of a waterfall. And Sam, in that moment, she's, saying something to her father that's difficult for her to say, and she's trying to find the right words. And I was thinking about, having the her kind of have to speak up because she's competing with this like loud white noise. And so we shot it next to a waterfall. It was unavoidable in the mix. We had to kind of embrace it.
Yeah, you really do feel that moment as well because of everything that Sam is trying to articulate in a way, that, she's nervous to say it at the same time, but also it's something that's really important. And how the relationship between father and daughter will be affected, you really do feel that so beautifully. And I feel like a lot of filmmakers again would be excessive in terms of like adding score or additional sound design, but the way that it plays out between these two actors is incredible. And I mean, we haven't really even talked at all about Lily Coleus yet, and the amazing discovery that she is in the way that I remember watching Hunger and seeing Michael Fassbender for the first time, or Jennifer Lawrence in Winter's Bone, or even Edward Norton in Primal Fear, where you see somebody and you just know there's so much going on, and the way she can express things just through a mere glance. So I was curious for you as a filmmaker, what was it like to see Sam come to life in that moment and be present? And did Lily at all share any of her journal entries that she was writing as Sam in the process?
She never did. In fact, I didn't know that that was part of her process until after the fact, which was nice. She got to have uh, a sort of sense of privacy. She got to have some secrets, secrets she still has, I think, as that character. I mean, her performance is sort of mysterious to me in a way that all great performances are. And I think it's just, when an actor is so intensely present in the scene, in the moment, that, you as the audience, and I include myself in that, watching her work, just I was so drawn in by her work that it felt, yeah, very I don't know, just very real. Lily and I were staying in a house together while we shot the movie, and I remember every night sort of being like surprised, feeling a little like surprised, like, oh, she's not Sam. Like, she's actually very different. She's not that girl. Her personality is very different. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Lily, that's my favorite topic. I'm so proud of her work, and I'm very, very excited to see what she does next. And I hope she continues to return my phone calls.
Yeah, I hope so too, because again, like you talked about the mysterious nature of the character, and I felt that in your work as well with Hannah's, where there's this back and forth between the two characters that feels both intimate and claustrophobic in New York City in a way that I've never really seen. Because when you think of the great outdoors, when you think of New York City, you think of the opposite. And
Mm.
in here with these characters and the back and forth, there's always a feeling of like you want to know what they're thinking, and you're always kind of mesmerized by the performance and the work that you're doing as a director in terms of just letting things breathe and listening to the environment. I don't have too much more time with you, but I was just curious in terms of what do you hope that this film does in terms of reaching an audience at the age of Sam? Because I know you've also talked about in past interviews that your sister Octavia, who's also a PA and boom operator on the film, was a big part in terms of finding Lily and helping with that casting process. Was she a good sort of source in terms of getting input on the script in terms of the authenticity?
I think I wrote it when I was living back at home during the pandemic. Me in my adult form, and my sister Octavia was in high school. Um, and I think she helped in just me observing, like the film's not a period piece.
But it feels like it though at times. Like it feels like it's like from the 60s or 70s, and
Oh,
there's like a
cool.
tactile quality to it with
Oh,
the
thank
film
you.
elements that feels like if it wasn't for the iPhones, you could feel like
Yeah.
it took place at a time that wasn't now.
Oh, thank you. I mean, that's high praise for me, because I think um, that film, my favorite films are the ones that feel sort of timeless, like forwards and backwards, where they feel like perennially fresh, even if they were made in the 70s, and also, speak to everything that came before. So I think that's definitely something, I don't know, I subconsciously strive for. But yeah, being around teenagers is inspiring. I think they're not like they're I think they have a sort of fresh, optimistic perspective on the world. And I, I, I'm lucky to have, young people in my life, I think.
Absolutely. And you
Yeah.
feel that as a filmmaker as well, that you're very observant and considerate of how, Sam navigates such tricky terrain. And there are so many little things I'd love to ask you more about, like even just like, taking dirt and putting them in the bowls. Was that something for, masking the scent for bears?
Oh, it's like, you can't like, you don't want to leave, yeah, like a trace of your food or, whatever you've brought into the woods. So, what you don't see in the movie is she would have like thrown that. It's a way of like cleaning the bowls, and then she would have thrown it into the fire. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm obsessed with all like details of any sort of subculture. Like I love to show process, because I'm interested in it, and what it says about the characters. So I was definitely thinking about that a lot.
Absolutely. Well, I have to wrap with you. So thank you so much for taking the time to
Oh my
talk to me
God.
about Good
Thank
One
you.
and your shorts as well, which I highly recommend anybody seek out. And I hope Good
Thank you
One
for
gets a blue.
watching them.
Well, I hope that Good One gets a Blu-ray release because
Oh my
I'd really
God.
love
I
to
hope
watch it
so.
again. And yeah, it's always really wonderful to talk to a filmmaker who feels like their voice is just coming together so wonderfully and has so much to say,
Oh my
and
God.
so thank you.
Thank you so much. Impressive collection you've got there behind you.
Well,
It's
funnily
very cool.
enough, after this, like I'm literally running out to Bay Street Video to pick up No Way Out. Because it just got a release on
Ah!
4K through Kino. So
Oh,
I'm
cool.
literally going to pick that up today.
Oh my God. Well, I will tell my dad.
But I yeah, congratulations on the movie and I really loved the shorts as well, quite a
My
bit.
God. Thank you so much for all your questions. Really enjoyed the chat.